My dreams started coming true, but why were they all about my biggest regret? The universe has a cruel sense of irony. It grants you the power to realize your deepest desires, but only after you've already given up on what truly mattered. I'm Alex, 38, and I finally achieved the kind of architectural success people only dream of. My life now is a fortress of glass and steel. I am a lead designer at Sterling & Associates, the firm that specializes in building the city's skyline, layer by cutting-edge layer. I drive a silent, expensive car, live in a minimalist penthouse overlooking the downtown core, and my name is known in every major development office. I am, by all external metrics, a successful man. But my success is a lie built on a decade of avoidance. My true passion, my soul's work, was never about maximizing vertical space for corporate profits. It was about preservation. It was about honoring the architectural ghosts of the past. My dream, shared with my partner, Elara 38, was to save the Old Port District, a stretch of beautiful, crumbling waterfront history centered around the magnificent, forgotten street. Jude Clock Tower. We fought that battle together, relentlessly, tirelessly. We organized protests, drafted meticulous preservation plans, and poured our hearts into saving that district from the wrecking balls of modernization. The battle culminated 10 years ago, when the city council voted. We lost, not just the vote, but everything. The emotional and financial toll was devastating. That night, after the final meeting, I had a choice: continue the unwinnable fight with Elara, living on grants and pure passion, or take the life raft that Mr. Sterling, 65, had been offering me for months, a position where I could be practical, rich, and respected. I chose the life raft. I chose stability over soul. I left Elara and the decaying charm of the old port behind for the polished, air-conditioned certainty of Sterling & Associates. I abandoned the St. Jude Tower project the day before the bulldozers rolled in. That was my biggest regret. I didn't fail the project. I failed Elara and, worse, I failed the only version of myself I respected. I built my entire present on the grave of my past character. I had tried to bury the guilt beneath layers of prestige and achievement. I thought the money would eventually suffocate the regret. It didn't. It just amplified the silence. The strangeness began right as I landed the most prestigious contract of my career, designing the new, 80-story corporate headquarters for Chiron Global. This was my apex. This was the building that would define my legacy. I was working late one Tuesday, finalizing the early drafts for the Chiron Tower lobby. The design was purely cold, modern minimalist, marble, glass, and sharp, unforgiving angles. I stepped out for coffee. When I returned 10 minutes later, a large, perfectly detailed sketch was lying across my drawing table. It was an architectural drawing of the Chiron Global lobby, but completely wrong. It wasn't minimalist. It was a breathtaking blend of wrought iron, warm, reclaimed wood, and impossibly detailed cornices. It was the lobby I had designed with Elara 10 years ago for the hypothetical street. Jude Heritage Center, the preservation plan that had been mocked as naive and impractical. My heart hammered. The drawing was not digital. It was ink on aged, heavy paper, the kind we used back then. I knew it wasn't a prank. The detail was too specific, the pain too personal. I threw the drawing in the shredder, convinced I was overworked and hallucinating. The next morning, my assistant, Maria, 25, placed the physical model of the Chiron Tower's lower 3 floors on my desk. It was supposed to be a pristine white foam model of glass and concrete. Instead, sitting there, meticulously crafted and weathered, was a perfect, scale model of the St. Jude Clock Tower. The bricks were tiny, aged foam blocks. The cracked plaster of the spire was rendered in textured paint. It was the lost, beautiful architecture of my past, somehow physically manifesting in my successful present. Jeremy, 40, my cynical rival at the firm, saw it and stopped dead in his tracks. Alex, what is this antique nonsense? Is this a joke? We are building the future, not a relic. I felt a dizzying coldness. I stammered, telling him it was a historical reference model for contextualizing the design. I hid the model in a utility closet immediately. I was beginning to realize the frightening truth. My mind was not just recalling my regret, it was physically projecting it into my reality. My successful timeline was being corrupted by the one I abandoned. If you knew that achieving your dream life was literally causing your greatest regret to bleed into reality, would you quit and try to undo your past, or fight to maintain the reality you built? The manifestations escalated, becoming intensely specific to the details of my betrayal. My current project, the Chiron Tower, was directly overlaying the ghosts of the St. Jude project. I dreamed I was standing on the construction site of the Chiron Tower, but beneath the cranes and steel girders, the foundational supports were made of the massive, worn stones of the old port sea wall, the very wall that was demolished 10 years ago. I could smell the salt air, hear the cry of gulls, and feel the gritty texture of the old stone beneath my fingers. I woke up gasping. I rushed to the Chiron site early that morning. Standing at the perimeter fence, I looked at the massive concrete pour. The construction foreman, a man named Gus, 50, approached me. "Morning, Alex," he grunted. "Funny thing happened last night. We pulled a couple of massive, old limestone blocks out of the deep pilings. Had to scrap them. Weird place for them to be. Limestone, the foundation of the old port sea wall. My dream was not a dream, it was a premonition of reality. The regret wasn't just in my head, it was in the foundations of my success. The most terrifying manifestation came in the form of sound. Every time I tried to sketch a new, modern facade, I would hear it, the faint, rhythmic, melancholic chime of the St. Jude Clock Tower. The sound wasn't in the office, it was internal, tied to the act of building something the tower represented. One evening, I was alone in the office, trying to finalize the design that would make Mr. Sterling millions. I couldn't focus over the haunting sound of the bell. I finally broke. I took a piece of charcoal and, instead of drawing the modern facade, I drew the tower. I sketched every crack, every pigeon stain, every architectural detail I remembered. I drew it perfectly, not from memory, but from a profound, terrifying knowing. As the final stroke fell, the ringing stopped, and I heard a different sound, a soft, metallic clink on my desk. It was an antique brass key. It was ornate, heavy, and tarnished green with age. I recognized it instantly. It was the key to the iron gate of the St. Jude Clock Tower, the gate that had been padlocked the day after the demolition order was finalized. Elara and I were the only ones who knew where the real, original key was hidden, and we destroyed the map to it 10 years ago. Yet, here it was, undeniable, sitting on the blueprint of the Chiron Global Tower. My successful, meticulously ordered life was collapsing under the weight of this invisible, painful reality. The next dream was the most vivid, the most emotionally devastating. It wasn't about buildings, it was about Elara. I was in the ruins of the old port. The St. Jude Clock Tower was still standing, miraculously preserved amidst the surrounding devastation. Inside, the dust motes danced in the single shaft of light filtering through the cracked rose window. Elara was there. She was exactly as I remembered her, fierce, covered in dust, but radiant with purpose. She wasn't sad or accusatory, she was simply working. She was painstakingly restoring an ancient mural on the wall, her brushstrokes meticulous. She turned to me, but she looked through me. She didn't acknowledge my presence. It's not about the buildings, Alex, she said, her voice echoing in the vast, empty space. It's about the truth they buried here. The money wasn't worth the lie. She pointed her brush at the mural. As she did, the paint on the ancient wall shimmered and then peeled away, revealing a cavity behind it. In the cavity was a single, leather-bound journal, the journal we used to document our research into the corruption surrounding the demolition vote. Then, the ground started to shake. The structure was collapsing. Elara didn't run. She calmly retrieved the journal and tucked it into her vest pocket, still ignoring me. I need to reveal the silver memorandum, she whispered to the dust. But I can't do it from here. I lunged forward to grab her, to tell her I was sorry, to save her. But my hands passed right through her shoulder. I was a ghost in my own dream, a helpless observer in the reality I chose to abandon. I woke up, cold sweat soaking the expensive Italian sheets. The dream had a terrifying implication. Elara was alive, she was still fighting, and she was in imminent danger because she was closing in on the truth, a truth buried 10 years ago when I walked away. The brass key on my desk felt impossibly heavy. It wasn't just a key to a building, it was a key to a secret, and potentially, a key to Elara's safety. I had to find the clock tower. Despite the demolition order, I knew Elara would have found a way to save it or use it as a base. I couldn't risk revealing the key or the dreams to anyone, especially Mr. Sterling, who was obsessed with controlling the narrative of the city's development. I drove back to the old port district. It was now a wasteland of industrial concrete, ugly and functional, the antithesis of my dream. The Chiron Tower site was a few blocks over. But there, amidst the rubble, stood the St. Jude Clock Tower, not miraculously preserved, but a scarred, abandoned husk. It looked exactly like the model that had materialized on my desk. I used the brass key. It slid perfectly into the massive iron gate lock. I stepped inside the silence of the tower. It smelled of dust, neglect, and the sea. I was looking for the ancient mural, the cavity, and the leather-bound journal. I found the mural, half destroyed by time and dampness. I found the cavity, just behind the flaking paint, exactly as I had seen it in the dream. But the cavity was empty. The journal, the silver memorandum, was gone. My heart sank. Elara had been there. She had retrieved the journal. She was continuing the fight, alone, with information that could destroy the careers of the people who profited from the demolition. The demolition that Mr. Sterling's firm, and indirectly, I, had benefited from. I rushed back to the office, my mind racing. I needed to know what the silver memorandum was, and how it connected to my current success. I couldn't ask Mr. Sterling directly. I started digging through old, archived firm files. It took me 3 days of pretending to work on the Chiron blueprints while actually searching the digital archives. What I found was chilling. The old port demolition wasn't just a standard development, it was a pre-arranged land grab. The original plan wasn't just to build warehouses, it was to secure the land for a massive, future project that required deep, unobstructed pilings, a project only hinted at 10 years ago. That project, the Chiron Global Tower. Mr. Sterling didn't just hire me for my skill, he hired me because I was the only person who knew the architectural heart of the old port and the only one who could cleanly pave over its memory. My success was the ultimate camouflage for his decade-long plan. My life was built on a crime I didn't commit, but benefited from massively. I stood on that balcony, the beautiful Amalfi Coast suddenly feeling like a gilded cage. I knew the letters were real. I knew the happiness I felt was manufactured, a bait to lead me to this, necessary sacrifice. The contradiction was a deep wound. How could the most loving, genuine person I knew be an agent of my total ruin? I immediately started reviewing the last year of my life, the life I had shared with Lila. I ran my company, a high-tech financial analytics firm, entirely remotely. All my sensitive corporate data, the proprietary algorithms that made me a multimillionaire, were stored on a cloud server only accessible through a complex, biometric and password-protected key. And the locket. The brass box was empty, but she had mentioned a locket. Was it truly a key? I checked the booking for the trip. Lila had booked a 1-week cruise leaving from Naples, 4 days from now, taking us into international waters. The only place where I would be entirely cut off from outside help, and where my network security would be dependent only on the local hardware. The urgency of the 7th letter became crystalline. The transfer, the access key, the destruction of my legacy. I had to choose. I could confront her, risking immediate, devastating emotional fallout and likely exposing the entire plot before I understood the mechanics of the betrayal. Or I could wait, maintain the facade of love, and try to uncover the access key before the cruise left Naples. The hardest part was the pervasive, nauseating doubt. I watched her across the room, humming a tune as she packed a small bag for a day trip to Capri. She looked angelic, genuinely happy. Could this person, who brought such light into my life, be a calculated agent of my financial and professional destruction? The life lesson I finally understood was devastating. The heart's capacity for denial is its greatest vulnerability, blinding us to the clearest signs of danger. I couldn't just ruin this perfect moment with an accusation based on letters from a scarred, future version of myself. I needed proof. I went to the safe in our rental house. I pulled out my corporate access key, a small, titanium drive containing the encryption keys to my entire empire. I held it in my hand. It was the only way she could execute the transfer. I was supposed to be keeping it safe. I had earned all my success through logic, data, and rigorous analysis. Now, my survival depended on acting against my deepest emotional attachment, solely on the word of a desperate future version of myself. What would you choose? Hand the corporate access key over to the police immediately, or risk waiting 2 more days to gather irrefutable proof, knowing that delay might cost you everything you've built? The sun had set, and the gold had turned to a deep, dangerous cobalt blue. I knew the time for denial was over. The greatest success is not the height of the tower you build, but the depth of the foundation you stand on. I want to know what you think. Was burning down my entire billion-dollar career to expose the truth and protect Elara the only way to find real peace, or was it a reckless, emotional mistake? Let me know your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.